I do think Jerry Garcia generally it belongs in the conversation along um with iconic American musicians, along with Bob Dylan and Paul Simon, and he does belong in that kind of conversation. So welcome, I guess, guys. This is um the first real show we've done in a while. We've been doing individual stuff, and I've been enjoying doing that too. But there's nothing really like the conversation that we have about these real songs. If you want to like and subscribe, that would be great. We're moving up in the world for sure, making lots of progress in the last couple weeks. Um, Today's show is going to be interesting because it's about a hip hop song that's not really a hip hop song. It's by a hip hop band, but not really rapping song. And another iconic American band. So we have today, OutKast's Hey Ya and Sugaree well, technically it's by Jerry Garcia. It was released on his solo album first, but it's most famously of the Grateful Dead. They played it live, tons of songs.
You know what? Real quick before we even get started, you know what the last couple of weeks it felt like to me?
What?
It felt like my senior year of high school when
Hmm.
I got bombarded with life and you kind of just took over the back end of the newspaper for me. It was like, no, no, no. You're like, don't worry about it. I'll figure all this stuff out. Go ahead and do what you need to do.
Yeah.
That's what I've actually thought about our senior year of high school a lot in relationship to this channel. I was thinking like, damn, man, because I was watching your video the
Hmm.
other day when I was coming home from work. And I'm like, Andrew's kind of just like kind of taking the reins like he did when we were seniors in high school. And I just became more of your senior writer, and you were actually more of the editor in chief because I didn't edit anything my senior year, if memory
Right.
serves.
Yeah,
Right,
there was a lot of other stuff going on, as I remember.
right. There was. And so, just shout out to you for the last couple of weeks. The first contextualization between these songs is that this is really a Jerry Garcia song that gets passed off as a Grateful Dead song.
Hmm.
And this is really an Andre 3000 song that gets passed off as an OutKast song.
Yep. Yep.
Um, what side do you want to start on?
I don't know. Outcast, I
Well,
guess. That's fine.
no, I'm cool with that because you want to know what I realize when I listen to these records, and I'm
Hmm.
not like I don't think this is any sort of hyperbole.
Hmm.
Had Andre stayed on that path that he's on the Love Below, I think
Hmm.
he would have been just as big as the Grateful Dead,
For real?
for real. Because when I listened to this record, I was like, man, I was like, and it's not my favorite record on the Love Below by any
Hmm.
means
Right.
either. Probably not even one of my favorite three records, but has a talent. He has an insightfulness as a writer that is just very, very rare
Hmm.
to come by,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And like I've said before, I don't think I've ever heard an MC make the simple sound so beautiful and complex.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he uses repetition. We'll talk about this later, but he'll use repetition in the song, even like all right, all right, all right, all right. Like that's it sounds when I'm saying it, it sounds kind of dumb, but like in the context of the song, it's perfect. And he does that repeatedly too. That's not the only time he did it. He does
Right.
repetition like that. But this is a song that like I've seen lots of acoustic guitar players cover. Like it's a song that people can get away in that song in that way. My mother loves this song. Like it's not it's a song that has crossed lots of boundaries. I mean, I wrote down at the bottom of this. So it's more like a James Brown P Funk kind of style. So it's kind of more in that vein to me than a hip hop ish vein. Maybe I'm wrong
It
about
kind
that, but
it no 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 no. I think you're right. It feels more Mick Jagger meets James Brown
yeah.
than anything. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because he stylistically, isn't doing anything complicated, but his
Mhm.
charisma and his voice is really coming through on this record like a Mick Jagger. But
Yeah.
it's got the funk and the pace and the soulfulness of a James Brown record. So
Yeah,
I think,
it's faster than you'd expect for Rolling
well,
Stones kind of song.
I'm glad you're bringing that up too, because this is what I mean about how he would have been big.
Hmm.
Is that on this record, well, this record is moving at a faster pace than he usually moves at
Hmm.
on on this album in particular, or on his section of this OutKast album.
Right.
And so to watch him move at this pace and for this to be his biggest record is
Mhm.
also pretty impressive. And that's why I mean, it's like, no, if he would have kept on this path, it's like he would have been, I think, bigger than even our hip hop minds would have imagined. He would have a
Yeah.
Grateful Dead-ish type of following.
Mhm.
He would. He's that
Wow.
type of talent. And it's like I listened to Sugaree a couple of times back to back,
Hmm.
and then I went and listened to Hey Ya, and I was like, Hey Ya's just a better record. And I was like, damn, you know what I'm saying? Because
Mm.
it's like, it's
Yeah.
like that's what his talent is like. It's like, no, he can make Grateful Dead, Rolling Stone, James Brown level records as a
Yeah.
solo artist had he chosen to go that path. And so, you know, that is something that crossed my mind. And of course, Sugaree and Hey Ya have some of the same repetitive
Yeah.
functions to them
Yeah.
that I'm sure we're going to be
Yeah.
comparing and contrasting. I'm pretty certain that's in your notes as well.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So, but I always think, what I think, and this is what I mean about how he makes the simple sound complicated, is when he goes, "Oh, you think you got it?
Mm.
Oh, you think you got it, but got it just
You just
don't
don't
get
get
it."
it.
So there's nothing at all.
Yeah.
And then, of course, this is that Mick Jagger that I'm talking about because he doesn't just say it all. He goes,
Hmm.
oh,
Mm.
he's
Right.
got swag. He's got that charisma to it. He knows when to freestyle even the syncopated lines and make it
Yeah.
fit like
Right.
on the next syncopation line. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? He's like, no, 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 I'll just freak that and stretch that out,
Yeah.
and it's the little nuances that make that song. But then he goes, but sex is always better when there's feelings
Involved.
involved. So now he's actually like starting to break down some of the dynamics of what it means to like, emotionally be in love with somebody
Yeah.
and how it like translate into the physical form. But he doesn't say it that way. He's just like, yeah, sex is always better when there's feelings involved. And it's like, oh yeah, it's like that's totally
I mean, it's
right.
true. It's true.
It is.
For
No,
sure.
no, no. It's true. I always tell people it's like, no, I remember, physically, I've remembered the ones that I love the most, the fondest, and the best. So it's
Yeah.
very, very true. Yeah. And so that's what I mean is he speaks to the complicated emotion that is love
Hmm.
with a beautiful simplicity. But I mean, he consistently does that, whether he's rapping or singing or scatting a la James Brown on this song
Yeah.
or on this album. And that's where the James Brown comes in too, is that, well, on a lot of these records, it's hard to say that he's singing. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if
It's
he's
not
really
really
singing
singing.
on,
No.
like, I don't know if he's really singing on Hey Ya.
No.
You know what I mean?
I
So
don't
it
think
is
so.
very James Brown like in
But it
that
is
sense.
melodic though. Like there is a melody involved in it.
But a la James Brown, very
Right.
sped up melody. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? So like no, the James Brown thing is like spot on. And this is one of those records that I realized too that it's like, man, we wore this record out
Oh
because
yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
because I've never really played it too much after its initial coming
Hmm.
out, but that's because it was just everywhere.
Yeah. This
But
was
then it's
like
one of those,
a Alanis Morissette kind of thing, like or Hootie and the Blowfish, or like in those mid '90s times that it got just overplayed to death, and you got tired of it. And then now, when you go back to it 15 or 20 years later, you're like, oh, this is actually a really good song. Like
right.
when you're not hearing it like over and over and over and over and over and over again.
No, I did remind myself. I was like, oh no, I was like, this song got played out for a reason. It's great.
It is a really, really good song.
I personally think, as far as that album is concerned, that literally the two songs that precede it are the gems of the album, and that "She Lives in My Lap" and "Prototype," which he
Okay.
also released as well. Like "She Lives in My Lap" was originally supposed to be the first single. He did release "Prototype." I find those to be artistically and creatively and musically superior to Hey
Hmm.
Ya, like on every single step.
Okay.
But Hey Ya is the infectious record, and it is the simple, stupid pattern of some of the repetitive things, and just Andre's nature of putting the simple together in a beautiful way.
Yeah, it's is silly without being silly. I don't know if that makes sense. He's doing voices in some of it, like he's making his voice sound differently and kind of in a silly
Yeah.
way, but the song is not really silly. I mean, when you actually
Well,
like look at the lyric of it, it's not um just a throwaway song. It's not like baby, baby. It's not like that. It's actually there's some
right.
serious emotional stuff in it too.
Well, I think also vocally, his goal on this project and on the song was to kind of be his own band,
Hmm.
like his own like Jimi Hendrix "Are You Experience" type of band.
Hmm.
And
You mean on the song or on like the Love Below?
song and album.
Okay.
That's what you're hearing vocally going because he plays with himself vocally a lot on this album.
Yeah, he does.
He does, which is a beautiful thing.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like
it's really cool.
yeah,
I dig it.
you don't hear an MC understand that his voice is an instrument to the level that Andre does on the Love Below. So there is some genius to that as well. But like I said, most of the genius is like this is what when he says, "Well, if they say it's nothing lasts forever, then
And
what
what
makes
makes
what makes what makes what makes love the exception?" You see how he gave
Mhm.
you the repetitive
Yeah,
to kind of pull you in before he hits you with that thought.
what makes
It's
love
like,
the
man,
exception? Yeah, that's
yeah, if nothing lasts forever, what makes love the exception? It's like, ooh,
yeah. There's some deep in there too. Like it's not
that's
just
what I so the repetitive is like, you know what I'm saying, making you dance and making you bop to the rhythm and the
mhm. Yeah,
like and
that
all that's there,
yeah, sure, yeah.
but the songwriting and the intricate and
Hmm.
thoughtfulness that is Andre is all over the record. It is.
Yeah. It's hidden though a little bit. I mean, he's not hiding it on purpose, but like, what is it? He says something like, "I know you just want to dance" or something like that at the end of one of the verses.
He said, yeah, y'all don't hear me, y'all just want to dance.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
he does a breakdown, right? So
And it's
he's
true, but it's true. Like
hmm
a lot of people listen to this melody and listen to the claps and the snaps and listen to
hmm
Andre's vocal performance and they're like totally missing the message. You know what I mean?
and
Because
that
the
happens in a
message
lot
is
of OutKast songs too, not just this one.
yes,
So
yes. I think they actually did a good job. I think that happened more early on than
mhm.
late.
Okay,
Yeah, for them as a group. But yeah, but this is this is also a great time capsule piece
okay.
for
What do you
the
mean by that?
era. I mean, black music was in a transitional place when
This
this
is
record
what
came out.
like early 2000s, yeah.
It's like 2003,
That's what I think. I was thinking it was
2002.
like around when I graduated from college, like it was about then. But
Yeah, so 2003, 2004, something like that.
mhm,
And so black music is going through a transitional kind of phase.
mhm,
And so we latched on to a lot of stuff. This is one of those. The Love Below speaker box was like
yeah,
one of those things that we latched on to that I think kind of like identifies the transitional nature going on at the times. Like
mhm,
we as a culture had started like using a lot of rock, a lot of funk,
mhm,
a lot of interpretations of black artists who quote unquote knew how to do popular culture music, like a Prince, a James Brown,
mhm.
a
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson, of course. I'm trying. Somebody just like literally slipped my mind that I wanted to say. But yeah, so transitional George Clinton,
Yeah,
where we started like really
yeah,
using their bigger, funkier crossover type things into
yeah,
our music. It's
yeah,
like their shit became like super cool around the early 2000s. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Mhm.
about all I had for this record, though. But I mean, that's a lot. But
It is a lot. Um,
what is in your notes? What else is in your
like
notes? So that we
there
cover.
are. This is actually a good time to like transition like pieces because there are lots of pieces that cross over. I mean, the the connection initially when before I had paid too terribly close attention to any of the lyrics is the shake it part. Like that's the
Mhm.
that was the part that connected in my head first. Um, I am not. We'll talk about this more in a minute, but I'm not a Deadhead. Like I'm not a Grateful Dead fan. I'm not like not one. It's just not something that I'm super familiar with. But I've been on a kick in the last month or so. Like I've been listening to it a lot more, and so I'm learning about them as we go. But anyway, the point is like to shake it like a Polaroid picture and shake it, Sugaree. Like that was the initial point of comparison in my
Hmm.
head. But I think there's more thematic crossover than just that, though, because they're both about relationships. They're both about like relationships that are kind of one-sided or not stable, I guess. Like they're talking about like because
I
Andre's
think
talking about like what do I really want to be here or not, and I mean it's that kind of thing.
how about this? I think Andre is exploring the idea of love,
Hmm.
and Jerry is in love.
Yeah,
Like one is exploring the idea of like what love means. The other person is like in love and is expressing the emotion of wanting that person, I don't know, to be nearer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a point of separation, right? I mean, like the song, the Sugaree song, is
Right.
set in a point of
Right.
separation.
Right.
Um,
Because you can tell they're not together.
right. To
Right.
be really clear, too, I actually got corrected on this in one of the shorts that I made about the Grateful Dead, when we were talking about it in the last episode, I think. But anyway, a guy named Robert Hunter is the songwriter for most of the Grateful Dead songs and for this song, like the lyricist of it, and Jerry Garcia was the like both the
Both of them.
singer and like the guitar player.
Okay.
So he is Jerry Garcia. Again, I was corrected by this. Thanks, guys. But I was corrected on that to say so. So the guy's name's Robert Hunter. That's the lyricist for this.
Is he part of the band or is he just a songwriter?
I think he's part of the band. Hold on. I again, I am not a Grateful Dead like aficionado in the way that I know all of these facts off the top of my head.
No, it's kind of funny. It's like I realized you did the Nas reaction video the other day, the pistols on my album
Okay.
cover, or pistols on your album cover. It's like I had to question myself. I was like, I don't know what KRS Boogie slash Boogie Down production song that sample came from. I actually had to like look for it to find
Mhm.
it, and it made myself think. I was like, well, I haven't listened to KRS One like on a regular basis in a long time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like when moments like that happen for what I do, it's like
Right.
I find myself like wanting to do a dig to
Yeah.
refamiliarize myself with somebody who's very, very important, like KRS.
Yeah. Like I heard it and just as in context to that, for as a quick aside, he wasn't, I don't think, a member of the band, but he was like friends with all of them, and he was a lyricist for a lot of their more famous songs.
Okay.
But anyway, and it does have a picture of him on Wikipedia of him like playing the guitar. So I assume he played with them at some point. Anyway, the KRS thing, like, first of all, I mean, and Nas obviously cites BDP in the song, like the Pistols on Your Album cover comes from the like an album cover, a BDP album cover, um,
Correct.
which I didn't know, but he says it like directly in the song.
Yeah.
So I went
Criminal
back and found
minded.
the album cover, and
By all means, hold
by all
on.
means
Yeah,
necessary.
criminal minded, and by all means necessary. They have pistols on their album cover.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
like it's them on a table on Criminal Minded, and I believe there's some guns on the table. Even though I haven't seen that album cover in forever, I'm just visualizing in my mind. It's KRS and Scott LaRock at the
okay.
table, and by all means necessary
He's
is
like peeking around
KRS.
the corner like this. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's by the window, a la
Yeah.
Malcolm X. That's the Malcolm X,
Okay.
uh, yeah, interpretation
Oh,
on
okay.
album two. Yeah, because
Um,
also too, Scott LaRock has been murdered.
mm,
So right, yeah,
okay. That makes sense.
right.
Like there's and that's why I'm looking forward to
There
hearing
was
some of the
context to the
things that you
pistols.
say about these records too, because I know for sure that there are pieces of information like history
Yeah,
and stuff like that that I'm missing in here.
yeah. There's even context to pistols on your album cover.
Yeah, I like I hear and I know enough now to know that I have huge gaps in my knowledge. Does that make sense? Like
Oh,
I know there are things that are missing, but
that's before my time, so I don't. That's what I mean about doing a KRS dig because, I'm pretty thorough off the top of the dome with anything post like 1991,
mhm.
Andrew. But it's like the stuff before 91. It's like no, I have to do my digging and my information and my research and ask questions and listen to people older than me
Yeah.
and all that stuff. Yeah,
So yeah, the
even though I'm
anyway,
familiar with the
the
music.
point is the people in the comments have been teaching me about the Grateful Dead too.
Hmm.
So I'm learning about that from them as well.
Yeah.
I thought I recognized KRS's voice because I liked the little sample, like the hook part in the Nas in Pistols on Your Album cover, but I didn't think about it beyond, oh, that's cool. And then I was like, he's citing BDP. That does sound kind of like KRS. I bet that comes from a song. And somebody in the comments said what song it was. I don't remember what it was, but somebody told me which song it was. Um, so I was very proud of myself, honestly. That and I'm proud of like I'm grateful to you for having taught me enough to be able to recognize how some of these parts connect.
I mean, it's how we grow. It's education and information.
So Sugaree is not a song that I knew really before a month ago, particularly. It's not something that I'm super familiar with, but um, it's been part of, like we were talking about with KRS. It's been part of kind of a deep dive kind of thing. Um,
Okay.
and
So it was
it's
a conscious. So you did a conscious Grateful Dead dive. It wasn't
yeah.
like an accidental, like you fell into it.
Yeah, there's a song they have called Ripple, which is really great. That kept coming up on my like playlists or whatever, like the algorithm playlists that YouTube Music would create for me.
Right.
And I wouldn't skip it, so it kept playing it. Um, and then I don't know, probably a month ago, one of my friends whose father has just passed was a Grateful Dead fan and found one of his records and was playing one of the ones called Shakedown Street. And that's so I started listening to that and I was like, actually, this is really good. Like, and I'd never really gotten into the music because a lot of the stuff that I listen to, the REMs and the are based in the kind of punk tradition, originally, or new wave tradition. And so coming from like the Ramones and coming from like that
Right.
kind of world,
Right.
and the Grateful Dead are obviously not that. They're coming from honestly the same tradition the Rolling Stones are, right? They're coming from the blues and folk and country and jazz. Like they're coming from that world, right?
Right.
And so, but the band is very different. The way they play is very different. The style of play is very different. They may not be. They're the original band that's called a jam band. They're probably not the original one, but
Okay.
so which is code for we don't play the songs like we play them on the albums. We have the same basic structure, but we jam out the solos and we expand things in different directions and kind of that has kind of a jazz feel, right? You kind of improvise as you
You know,
through as it goes.
I mean, I think that sometimes that's just great stage presence and
Hmm.
performance too. I
Yeah.
mean, I've also told people like the first concert I ever saw like in my life, and I'm fortunate and blessed, was Prince for the Love Sexy tour,
Mm,
87, 80, 87, 88. But it was the first time that I heard records that I knew the words to,
right.
but he was extending the melodies or doing different
Yeah.
breakdowns
That's
or
that's my
taking
favorite
pieces
part
of.
about live music,
And I was like, that was the
or one of my
part
favorite
of it
parts.
where it's like my memory probably really kicked in. It's like, no, no, no. He just performed Little Red Corvette different than what I hear on the radio.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Raspberry Beret is different than what I heard on the radio when you're fucking with Prince. And so, like, yeah, that whole jamming out, like live studio, out of the studio, no, that matters. That matters in the impression that the artists leave with their fans too, because
Mm,
I still remember. I mean, well, every time I've seen him, it's like, well, no, he goes off script and
yeah.
jams. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. He
yeah.
is in that vein too. Like in I wouldn't necessarily compare Prince to the Grateful Dead, other than say that they're both. I mean, they're both coming from soul and funk and blues worlds, and they both are big time into improvisation on stage too, and jamming, and um, kind of seeing what new stuff shows up when you're playing, right? And that's one of those crossover things too. Like for example, with Sugaree, like the album version of it on Jerry Garcia's Garcia album, which was early 70s, is like 5.5 minutes ish, I think.
Yes,
Um,
almost six.
yeah, and but they're like the live versions. Like I was driving back from dropping my daughter off at daycare this morning, and I said, Siri, play Sugaree by the Grateful Dead, and it played a live version of it. And it played I did it twice because I went back and forth between a Hey Ya and that. Um, and a couple of them were 7.5 minutes probably. I've listened to one too that's 17, like in as part of
Hmm.
this. So they have it can there are places in the solos that they can kind of expand it out.
Yeah, and there are
And
songs there's songs that bands and artists do structurally that they know when they're done with the song, it's like, oh, when we do that live, we can da 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 da
yeah,
da da.
and they have lots of different
Yeah,
options too.
yeah. It's like that's our song where it's like we might end up there for 20 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and all of Grateful Dead songs are like that. So um, it's I mean at its root, it's a really simple song. It's like a 2 chord vamp basically. I mean it has other chords too, but like the basic riff is
Hmm.
two. Very much like Imagine actually. Um, and it's the same two in fact as Imagine, but
Hmm.
it's because it has that platform. You have lots of different directions you can take it.
Hmm.
And
Safe launching pads for
yeah,
musicians.
yeah, and there's lots of different options when you only have those things, but it gives you a structure and it gives you kind of a base to go off of. I was definitely more familiar before, as I'm doing this dive, with the Grateful Dead, as I think most people are, with the Grateful Dead iconography than I am with the songs, like
Explain.
the bears holding hands and the skeletons and like all the pictures and stuff that go
All
along
right.
with that,
More
and that
familiar
they're
with
a
the
jam
branding.
band and they play really long songs and and all the people smoke weed at the shows. I mean, like those facts generally in society about that, but
You're
not
more
as much
familiar
about the
with the
music.
right. You're more familiar with the brand than the music.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
feel that way about a lot of white groups, to be honest with you, if I have to be completely honest. You know what I'm
mhm.
saying? It's like, oh, well, I know them more for their hair than I know them for their music.
Right.
Or I know them more for, their famous drug binges after shows than I do for
Yeah.
their music. Or I know them for their branding, a la a Kiss or a Grateful Dead,
Right.
more than their music. Like, one of the most revealing things to me, um, probably the most revealing thing to me in the time that we've done this
Hmm.
is that through us doing a couple of Queen songs,
Hmm.
I found out who Freddie Mercury really is as an artist and as a musician and as a singer.
Hmm.
And he's like all time great and brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to like, no, 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 he's up there. He's up high. He's one of the best vocalists ever.
Hmm.
And yeah, like, and it's not even a question. But I'll tell you what, until we did this show, I just thought they were a novelty band and he was just a knockoff kind of like, you get what I'm saying? Like
Yeah. Sure.
I never took Queen's musical chops seriously until like we started doing the songs and breaking it down. I started listening to some of the other records and I really started like really like listening to his voice, like
Hmm.
and listening to his voice in a manner where I didn't think it was in a parody or satirical form,
Right.
And I was like, oh, hold on. I'm like, no, this motherfucker can really sing opera. Like,
No,
oh
he
shit.
could. Yeah, for sure.
Right. Like if he wanted to, he could sing opera. That's not a parody. This is not a game. But
Right.
because of how Queen is projected brand and image wise in
Right.
black culture, they're not taken seriously, and neither is Freddie Mercury.
Yeah. He's campy. Like so he is like very dramatic for sure.
Hmm.
But and it
That's why I
is a
said
little bit
opera.
of a like a stage persona. But like but he backs that up with great songs and great voice and great like he has that underlaying the
Like,
silly.
yeah, no, no, no. He's sitting on a great set of chops and a great set of songs.
Hmm.
So, yeah. And that's the part where it's like, oh no, I kind of missed that. And so, these things are revealing, as even on my side about the bands and stuff. It's like, a lot of people might just look at Andre and be like, "Oh yeah, like that's the guy that did Hey Ya," and like,
Hmm.
what I'm saying? It's like, man, he's like part of the most important Southern rap group ever. You know what I
Right.
mean? You might not know
Exactly.
that if you're a
Yeah.
Hey Ya fan and you just found out about Andre like on Bombs Over Baghdad and Miss Jackson and The Love Below. You might
Hmm.
not know the
And
things that.
that's honestly where I started, right? That's where it works the same way for me with them. Like that's where those were my entrance points. And I think for a lot
Mhm.
of white culture, that's probably our entrance points to OutKast. And there are people who stopped there, and there are people who dug more deeply because obviously he's a supreme lyricist, and obviously he's an incredibly talented musician, and not just a rapper. And not that that doesn't mean he's a musician, but like he is capable of doing lots and lots of different things outside of just being an MC.
Yes. Yes. I mean, Hey Ya's Hey Ya's evidence that he could have been a pop star if he wanted to. That's what I
Exactly.
mean. It's like no, it's like he could have not even went the R&B route. He could have went the pop route, and just like immediately got on whatever. I mean, the video for me was like a modern day American Bandstand, correct?
Yeah, that's what he's doing.
Yeah, yeah, he's doing a modern day American Bandstand. It's like no, 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 that's some art imitating life. It's like no,
Mhm.
he really could have went out and did that.
He really could like it, and not in. I mean, the song is not a joke, but the video is kind of like the video. It's
Yeah,
not
the
a
video
joke,
is
but like
definitely
he's it's a parody, right?
the video is definitely a parody.
Because he's being kind of you know
But
hamming
the
it up.
but the rec but the record, although serious, is written with some tongue in cheek
Oh
moments
yeah,
though. So the parody
you
side
can
of it
write a record
fits.
with tongue in cheek moments without it being like all meant to be. It's not all meant to be funny, right? It's meant
Right, right, right. There's often some sadness and some darkness in parody
yeah.
format writing. Like I feel like Edgar Allan Poe is somebody who wrote like in a parody form, and it often doesn't get credit for it because it just seems so dark and so dense. It's like no, it's a little clever, a little witty, a little tongue in cheek too. But
Right. That's often, I mean, you see that in lots of comedians, honestly. That's how you touch on like dark stuff. That's how you cope with it. That's how you like deal with it. Um by by putting doing some tongue in cheek stuff by shake it Sugaree or by shake it like a Polaroid picture or what like you're but he's still they're both still talking about fractured relationships, right? Like
right,
if you're getting down into the weeds with them there.
right, right,
So and that's one of the things that both of them do on these two songs is they give you something that you can sing along to without really thinking about it too much. And then you're taken along on that journey and you're like, oh wait, where did I
right.
just end up?
And
Uh,
I think that's the most repetitive thing that we've seen occur since we've been doing these songs on both sides is it's like, well, these songs are famous because quite frankly, people don't even get to the depth and sometimes until years later because
yeah.
the melody, the chords, the vocal performances of the artist.
Yep.
And so like, the more we talk, I mean, how about this doing this show has affected how I look at MCs
Has it really?
and therefore has affected, according to hip hop, and my takes on there because I understand now more clearly than ever how important the voice is in a way that I never did before.
Hmm.
Because I realize that no matter what type of music that you're doing, the first buy-in is the melody and the voice. As much as I'm a writer's writer and into songwriting,
Yeah.
it's like no, no, no. It's the melody and the voice
No,
first.
it is, and that hurts me as a because I'm a lyricist too, obviously, but like,
Yes,
um, sometimes to my detriment, like I want to say too many different things instead of paying attention to the melody part. But
yes,
the
yes, definitely.
but like as a independent of being an artist, and as just talking about as a fan of music, the things that grab me to start with, it's always the vocal melody, almost always the vocal melody
Yeah.
first. Like, and that's the part that makes me like want to go deeper and pay attention to what they're actually saying. Um,
And this is what I mean about how the voice matters. And sometimes I didn't even know it. It's like I can remember Tupac when he made Strictly for My Niggas, and it's like my cousin Mario used to play it all the time. And I can remember knowing almost all the words to the album before I really understood what he was saying.
right.
But it's because his voice was so great. And it took me being a grown man before I realized it's like, man, I was singing that whole album. I didn't
Hmm.
even know what the hell he was talking about
Yeah.
because his voice was so infectious when Cuz would play the records. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And so when I'm going back and listening to Keep Your Head Up, it's like, I'm like, oh, wow, this dude's like 20, 21 years, 20 years old making this song like
Hmm.
this.
Yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? I remember Marvin Gaye used to sing to me. He had me
You
feeling
feel
like
like
black was the thing to be.
yeah,
I was like, no, it didn't register like on that level until like I was a little bit. I was like, oh man, it's like man, vocally though,
yeah.
had I was vocally he already had me before I even realized the depth of the songwriting.
Hmm. And
Hmm.
even I mean, because you can still walk around saying "keeping your head up," right? I mean, you can walk around singing that even if
Hmm.
you pay attention to none of the other stuff. The feeling like black is a thing to be like that. That is an iconic, obviously, um, line of that too. But the other thing that I wanted to get into a little bit before we go is that I've read when I was doing some research for this and in the comments on some of the Grateful Dead stuff that I've already posted on our channel. I've heard multiple people say, both famous musicians and random fans, say that the Grateful Dead is the greatest American band ever. And see, that reaction you just had is the same one that I had. It's like, no, that can't be right. But really, like other than the Isley brothers, like who else are you putting on that level?
I do think the Isley Brothers are better than the Grateful Dead inherently. Um,
You think the Isley brothers are better than, or as good as, or better than the Beatles? So yes, of course they're better than the Grateful Dead. Like um,
yes, yes, I do think the Isley Brothers give the Beatles a run for their money.
that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Like, so if they're on that level, then clearly they're above.
Yeah,
Like,
so
like,
so yes,
but
I think that question being forged is sometimes forged for popular white culture with a band like the Isley
which
Brothers
is why I'm bringing it up now. Yeah.
Earth, Wind and Fire being forgotten.
Hmm.
So I would quibble that Earth, Wind and Fire and the Isley Brothers are closer to that than the Grateful Dead is.
Hmm.
Um, and then I'm just trying to think of American rock bands
That's where I didn't get stuck, but I was like, wait, all the
because
other ones that
that's
we talk about being iconic, the Beatles, the Stones, AC/DC, Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, they're all British. Well, AC/DC is Australian,
Queen.
but like Queen, yeah, I mean, like all of them are, or very few of them are American, really. Our iconic American artists, the ones you think of belonging in that top tier, are almost all solo artists.
I was actually about to say,
I mean, Springsteen and Joni Mitchell and Dylan and I mean, I guess Simon and Garfunkel kind of count as a band because it's two people. And
no, they're not.
Prince and Mike and Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye and
Right.
Otis Redding and Sam, like all of them are solo artists.
I
So,
was actually about to say, for the first time, I think Kurt Cobain not being here really hurts because had Nirvana continued on, they
yeah,
would be the answer to this question, I think.
they are
Don't you
part of
think?
that conversation. Um,
They would be the answer though had he lived.
yeah, yeah, in the white culture part of the world, yeah.
And the white that's
I
what I
can't
mean by
argue with Earth, Wind and Fire and the Isley Brothers being like more iconic. Um,
yeah.
like
And on a
you have to
personal
also
level,
go ahead.
like just this is one of those things too. It's like, well, I've met Earth, Wind, and Fire before,
Yeah,
and like, yeah, it's like, yeah, sign me up for those guys.
yeah,
It's just
yeah. The That's the thing though, like it's the same kind of conversation like when you were talking I think I've seen at some point you talking with Mike about where Wu-Tang like ranks in the hip hop group like rankings or whatever. And
mhm.
the question is, I mean, are you counting just the Wu-Tang output? Are you counting only built for Cuban Links and Purple Tape? Are you counting like all their side projects and solo stuff too? Is that part of Wu-Tang's like iconography, right? And in the same way, like the Grateful Dead, are you counting the the iconography, like the stuff that goes along with the band, the the touring all the time and having the huge concerts that they play and the jamming out of the songs and the Grateful Dead bears and the dancing skeletons and like the weed culture. Are you counting all of that as part of their because I do think not just in like the narrow Grateful Dead fandom, it's not really narrow, but like in that thinking of it in that narrow way, um I think like most people, given the chance, like if I said name a Grateful Dead song, you'd be like, most people would be like I don't know that I could have named very many before I went on this dive either, which is not the case for most bands. But like
Here's
all the other stuff that goes along with it is that part of their impact as a band.
I'll tell you what. So when I have this conversation with Mike about Wu-Tang, here's what I always say. Well, if you're just talking about the group albums,
Hmm.
they're a top five group. If we're just talking about Wu-Tang Clan
Right.
releasing albums under the name
36 chambers,
Wu-Tang
etc.
Clan,
Yes, sure.
36 Chambers, Wu-Tang Forever, The W, Iron Flag. Yes, the Wu-Tang albums, top five group. Now, when you start stacking in all the other albums, though, Andrew, and then the brand and the name and the stars and the MCs and the
Right.
producer, it's like, and then it becomes, well, clearly number one
Right.
at that point.
And that's the kind of the point that I'm making about the Grateful Dead too. Right.
Yes, very, very similar in that. But here's the thing about it where it's different for, I think, Wu-Tang. I think even though the Grateful Dead are canonized,
Hmm.
I think the canonization of them is a little overstated because they're American. And here's why. When you were naming all those British bands, I said to myself, all of those British bands are better.
They are, I think, right?
They're all
Like,
better. Zeppelin's better. Um, Queen's better. The Rolling Stones and the Beatles are definitely better. You know what I'm saying?
mhm,
It's just a fact. And so some of this is American white culture
mhm.
lifting this band up a little higher than they deserve to be in my estimation. Because I've heard some of their stuff before, and I have friends who are white, who are fans of the Dead, our
Yeah.
age bracket, a little bit older. Yeah, yeah. So I kind of get it. But musically, I don't find them to be in the same place as the other people that we mentioned on the black side or on the white side, if we're
No,
being totally
they're
honest.
definitely not as intense, I guess, is part of the deal. Um, and that's one of the reasons that I am like being drawn to them now because they have lots of other obviously intense things in my life right now. I have, two children that are pre-kindergarten age and I'm a high school teacher. Like there's lots of other things that are going on, obviously. So it's very like chill and it's not something that like grabs my attention and like holds my attention in the same kind of way. Which I guess sounds like a slight, but I don't mean it that way. It's calming, I guess, in a way too.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't find the music to be his like, oh wow,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I understand. Like, and that's what I would have said 6 months ago too. So again, I am learning in that direction too. I'm not arguing with you necessarily. I just
Yeah.
I'm starting, I think, to see some of it for real, as opposed to just kind of dismissing it as that thing that's not really me, right?
Like this is what I mean. So when people say that they're like America's greatest band, it's like, okay, I want you to name the record that they have that's like comparable to Footsteps in the Dark by the Isley Brothers. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Where it's like where that song comes on and it's like, whoa, like,
Or
like
shout, or. I mean, there's like a long list, sure.
right,
Same with
for
Earth,
the
Wind,
love
and Fire. With
for the
September,
love
like
of
with
you.
yeah.
Yeah, right. What do you have for September after the love is gone? Reasons.
Hmm.
Yeah. Serpentine Fire. Yeah, like so I think sometimes, and in all honesty, like, Mike is the one who bought the Isley Brothers thing to me.
Hmm.
And I was like, no, I was like, that makes sense. I'll give you that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's not something that I ever would have thought of before either until you brought it up on one of the show. I don't remember
Yeah,
which one it was. I was like, wait, actually, yeah, like
yeah.
that's a really really fucking deep catalog. Like that's a
Yeah.
deep iconic
And and,
catalog, and I don't
and it's
think
a
they get the
groundbreaking
same credit that they deserve for it.
and it's a groundbreaking catalog too.
Yeah,
that's where it's Beatles like too. It's like
Right.
no, 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 not just great music, but groundbreaking
Hmm.
and often used in direct relationship to sampling and
Right.
in interpretation of artists. Like I mean, quite frankly, it's like, and it's funny we talk about it. I mean, he's still a musical genius of sorts. Well, R. Kelly's catalog is like straight out of the book of Ron
Oh yeah.
Isley. That's why
Yes, it
he
is.
used Ron Isley so much and
Hmm.
did so much work with him. It's like, well, you jack this whole style.
Exactly. Exactly. And the Dead is kind of like an amalgamation of a lot of things that came before them too. They're pulling from Dylan and they're pulling from, even though they're kind of
Right. I
contemporaries,
mean,
and they're pulling
if
from the Stones and they're pulling from all of that. The
I
jamming
mean,
out part, the improvisational jazz-ish kind of blues stuff is pulling from different sources, but like
if
I mean, Muddy
you know what
Waters
else?
jam stuff, like it's not.
You know what else I just thought of too?
Hmm,
What if Jimi Hendrix lives? Like
yeah,
he might have the greatest American band ever. The RU
yeah,
Experience band, like they might be the best band. You
right.
know what I mean? So there's a
And I
lot of
mean, part of
music.
that conversation too is you count Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band as like a band, or is it just Springsteen? You count the Dave
Right.
Matthews Band as a band, or just like he doesn't belong in that conversation. But you know what I mean? Like, there's lots of people like Hendrix, or I mean, that have like a clear lead singer that's name is in the title of the band, and then a band with them. Um,
Yeah. I was about to say, I mean, Andrew, you know how I feel about Prince. I mean,
mhm.
Prince's best run is Prince in
With the
the
Revolution,
Revolution.
yeah,
It's
and
like,
he's
oh
another
no,
example, right?
I'm taking Prince in the Revolution over the Grateful Dead. I'm sorry, like the Grateful Dead has nothing for Prince in the Revolution. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like nothing.
and
Like
and
they,
that's the
there's no
thing.
like there's no
And one of the things,
1999 Little Red Corvette, Raspberry Beret, all of
mm,
Purple Rain.
yeah, and that's the thing. That was kind of an important part of this conversation. And we've kind of sidetracked, not from we've sidetracked from OutKast, but though some people could argue that OutKast belongs on that list too as a group. I think it's an important conversation to have. And one of the central points of this show is that when we talk, or when a lot of people who look like me talk about the greatest blah 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 of all time, um, they're often like mentally editing out a lot of iconic black
Black
artists.
culture.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
black culture.
and that's why I wanted to talk about it, because um I can simultaneously think the Grateful Dead are higher up on the American bands list than I would reflexively have said 6 months ago. Like, I think they're better. My opinion of them has risen in the last 6 or 8 months, but also think that they are not as iconic or as important as the Isley Brothers or Prince and the Revolution. One could argue Van Halen should be on that list. One could argue REM should be on that list. Um, there, and then you quibble about whether you count Springsteen as a band or just a solo artist or whatever. Like, and that's a Earth, Wind, and Fire too. Like, I just want to make sure that because we're doing the show, that we're not editing out the black cultural experience. Like, that needs to be um
I mean,
part of that.
so so what I would submit to you is that first of all, I appreciate you doing that. It's like I was just looking up the Revolution as a band. It's like no, no, no. They did 1999 and
Hmm.
Purple Rain and Parade and Around the World in a Day. That would qualify them just
Yeah.
off those four projects that they did as
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
in my opinion. I
Yeah.
don't even know if I and listen to what I'm saying. It's like all like all respect due to the Isley Brothers. The Isleys don't have an album like 1999 or Purple Rain.
No. No. No, they don't.
You know what I mean?
Um,
And neither do the Grateful Dead, in my opinion.
the people in our comments are going to say Working Man's Dead and American Beauty. But like, I can name songs off of those albums that you just named, and before a couple months ago I couldn't name songs off of those. Like, so, and maybe that's just my ignorance, but it's still it speaks to their place in American culture too, I think. That we're familiar with one and not the other.
Right. Well, I mean that's part of why we did this too. So
Yeah,
you know,
like, but I think your point is excellent that both Hendrix um and like the Hendrix Experience and Nirvana would have been the other two that belong in that conversation had they produced more than two albums each or three.
each
Three.
they both have like a 2.5-ish kind of
Yeah,
album output, but
yeah.
that's why I'm saying it's like no, Prince and the Revolution have a four
And
album
that's
output. It's like no, that's qualified. Like for me, that's qualifiable.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've honestly never found the Grateful Dead's lyrics that compelling, if I'm being 100% honest. But they're,
They haven't made anything that sticks in my mind,
yeah,
like that stays where it's like, oh no, I know that.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And they didn't get the same kind of radio play and the same kind of, they weren't that kind of band. Um, One of the reasons they're iconic, honestly, is because they allowed people to record their live sets all the way back to the late 60s, early 70s. So there are
Wow.
bootleg recordings and archives of basically every show that they've ever played. My uncle was my aunt's ex-husband was a huge Dead fan, and he had hundreds of bootleg tapes and stuff of their
Wow.
shows. So um, that's part of the culture. The taping of the shows is, which is why they have records of 55 different versions of the song or whatever. Like, um,
Right.
it's one of those things. Anyway.